The morning I drove down my mountain road and found 3 armed guards blocking it, I thought someone had made a mistake. 2 black SUVs were parked across the entrance like a security checkpoint. A metal barrier blocked the gravel path, and a sign claimed the HOA had shut down the road. There was only one problem. I built that road myself. 2 black SUVs were parked across the gravel entrance like something out of a movie. 3 men stood beside them wearing tactical vests, radios clipped to their shoulders and sidearms resting on their hips. One of them held a clipboard like he was guarding a government facility instead of a quiet mountain road that had existed long before their little HOA was even an idea. And the most unbelievable part was that the road they were blocking was a road I had built with my own money. I had spent 3 years carving that road through rock, dirt, and forest long before anyone in that neighborhood had even heard the word Homeowners Association. But that morning, they were standing there like they owned it, and they had absolutely no idea what kind of mistake they had just made. My name is Daniel Carter, and I moved to the mountains because I wanted peace. The property sat high above a small valley, surrounded by thick pine forest and old granite cliffs that caught the morning sun in a way that made the entire place glow gold at sunrise. The nearest town was 20 minutes away. The nearest neighbor was half a mile down the slope. It was exactly the kind of place someone buys when they want to escape noise, politics, and neighborhood drama. Back then, the land was completely undeveloped, just forest, a small clearing, and a steep natural ridge that made access nearly impossible from the public road below. Most people saw a problem when they looked at that ridge. The land itself had been sitting unsold for almost 8 years because nobody wanted to deal with building access through the mountainside. Contractors had given previous buyers ridiculous estimates for road construction. Some had quoted over $200,000 just to carve a safe driveway up the slope. But I had spent 15 years working in heavy construction before switching careers. So I bought the land, and then I built the road myself. It took months of planning, permits, and engineering surveys before a single rock was moved. The county required environmental approval, drainage systems, and slope stability tests. Every step had to follow regulations because mountain roads can cause landslides if built poorly. By the time the paperwork was finished, I had a full legal permit to construct a private access road across my own property line. Then the real work started. For almost a year, the mountainside echoed with the sound of excavators and rock saws. Dirt was cut away in careful terraces. Drainage channels were carved into the slope. Truckloads of gravel were delivered to create a solid base that would survive heavy rain and winter snow. Slowly, the road took shape. A winding half-mile path climbing the mountain in gentle curves instead of dangerous straight climbs. When it was finished, the road looked like it had always belonged there. And legally, it did. Every inch of it sat on land that belonged to me. The county inspected it, approved it, and recorded it as a private access road tied directly to my property. Then I built my house at the top. Life stayed quiet for a few years after that, just the way I liked it. Then the developers arrived. The valley below my land had always been empty ranch property. One year, it was open fields and cattle fences. The next year, survey trucks started appearing. Soon after that, construction crews showed up. Within 2 years, an entire neighborhood had appeared at the base of the mountain. Large modern homes, clean sidewalks, community parks, and a brand new age. At first, none of it affected me. Their neighborhood sat at the bottom of the ridge while my land was above everything. The only connection between us was the small section of public road that passed through the valley before reaching the base of my inland path. But ours rarely stay within their own boundaries once they start believing they control everything around them. The first letter arrived about 6 months after the neighborhood finished construction. It was placed neatly in my mailbox with the HOA logo printed across the top like an official government notice. The letter explained that the association had recently conducted a community access review and determined that my private mountain road created potential traffic and safety concerns for their neighborhood. According to them, any road connecting to the public street inside their development required HOA, which was absurd. My road had existed years before the development was built, and it did not cross a single inch of their land. I ignored the letter This time it included a request for a meeting with the HOA board. I ignored that one, too. Then one afternoon, a woman knocked on my front door. She introduced herself as Karen Whitmore, the HOA president. Perfect name for someone about to start a problem. She stood on my porch wearing an expensive blazer and the confident smile of someone who had never been told no in her life. She explained that the HOA needed to discuss shared road responsibilities. I told her the road was not shared. She told me the community believed otherwise. I told her the county records would disagree. She told me the HOA had lawyers reviewing the situation. That conversation lasted about 5 minutes before I politely asked her to leave my property. I assumed that would be the end of it. I underestimated how determined some people can be when they convince themselves they have authority they do not actually possess. Over the next few months, the HOA sent multiple notices claiming that my road created liability risks for their residents. They argued that emergency vehicles might use their neighborhood street to access my property. They suggested that future homeowners in the valley could be affected by traffic. They even tried claiming that my gravel road did not meet their community aesthetic standards. The funniest part was that my road was never inside their HOA, not legally, not in any document that existed. Still, they kept sending letters. Eventually, I sent one back. A short response including copies of my road construction permit, property survey, and county approval documents that should have ended the discussion permanently. Instead, it made them angry. And angry ahas do stupid things. The real trouble began when the HOA board decided they wanted control over all access roads in the valley. Their lawyers drafted a proposal suggesting that my road should be classified as a community connector, which meant the HOA could regulate it. They even offered to maintain the road for me if I agreed to let them manage it. That proposal went straight into the trash. Then they tried intimidation. More letters, more warnings. More threats about legal reviews and compliance notices. Months passed like that. Until the morning, I drove down the mountain and found armed guards standing across my road. They had parked directly on the gravel entrance where my private road met the public street below. A temporary metal barrier stretched between the SUVs. A printed sign read, "For a moment, I genuinely thought it was a joke." Then one of the guards stepped forward and told me the road was temporarily closed until the OO completed an access investigation. He spoke like he was delivering a rehearsed script. Professional, calm, completely unaware that the road he was guarding belonged to the man sitting in the truck, directly in front of him. At the sign, at the SUVs blocking the entrance. And I realized something important. The HOA had just crossed from annoying into illegal. Very illegal. Because blocking someone's private road is not a minor violation. It is property interference, and when armed security is involved, the situation gets serious very quickly. The guard politely told me I would need authorization to continue. I calmly explained that I own the road. He said he was only following orders. That was the moment I understood exactly how far this situation was about to escalate, because the HOA thought they were dealing with a quiet mountain homeowner who would eventually give up and accept their authority. They had no idea they had just interfered with a legally permitted private access route built and registered entirely under my name, and they definitely had no idea how well documented that road actually was. What they had just done would trigger a chain reaction none of them were prepared for. A chain reaction that would eventually involve county officials, lawyers, property law violations, and a very embarrassing public meeting for the HOA board. But standing there that morning, looking at those armed guards blocking my own road, I realized something else. The people responsible for this decision truly believed they were in control. They believed the road belonged to them now. And sometimes the only way to correct that kind of arrogance is to let someone walk straight into the consequences of their own mistake. So I parked my truck, stepped out, and calmly called my lawyer. The valley below looked peaceful that morning. The pine trees swayed gently in the mountain wind. Birds circled above the ridge, and 3 security guards stood proudly in front of a road they thought they controlled. None of them knew the next few days would turn into the most humiliating legal disaster that HOA had ever experienced, because when someone blocks the road you built with your own money, On land you legally own, the law has a very clear opinion about how that situation ends, and the HOA was about to learn it the hard way. What happened after that phone call would spread through the entire valley, reach the county offices, and eventually force the HOA board to face consequences they never imagined when they decided to put armed guards on a road that never belonged to them. And that was only the beginning. The lawyer answered on the second ring. His name was Michael Harper, and he had handled every property issue I had ever encountered since buying the land. He already knew the history of the road, the permits, and the endless stack of AVO letters that had been arriving over the past year. I explained what I was looking at while standing a few yards away from the barrier. 2 SUVs, 3 guards, a metal gate, a printed sign claiming HOA authority over my road. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he quietly said that nobody had the legal right to block a privately permitted access road that sat entirely on recorded private property. What they had done was not just a disagreement about rules, it was interference with property access, he told me, to take pictures of everything. So I did. I walked slowly along the entrance and photographed the barrier from every angle. The guards watched me but didn't try to stop me. One of them looked slightly uncomfortable, as if he was beginning to realize the situation might not be as simple as he had been told. Pictures showing the road marker that the county had installed years earlier, identifying it as a registered private access route. Then I stepped back toward my truck and sent every photo to my lawyer. Within 2 minutes my phone rang again. His voice sounded different now. Sharper. He told me to stay where I was for a little while and avoid arguing with the guards. He said he was making a call to the county planning office. The reason was simple. When a private road is registered with the county as the only legal access to a property, blocking that road can trigger immediate enforcement action, especially when the blockage is intentional. While I waited, one of the guards approached again. He was younger than the others, maybe early 30s, and his expression had shifted from confident to cautious. He explained that they had been hired by the HOA management company to enforce a temporary closure while the association reviewed road ownership. The man spoke like someone who had simply accepted a contract job without digging into the background details. He told me they had paperwork authorizing the restriction. I didn't ask to see it. Because I already knew something important, the HR might have believed their paperwork meant something. But county records always outrank Army Bisha. About 20 minutes passed before another vehicle appeared on the road below. A white county truck rolled slowly toward the entrance. The guards immediately stepped aside as the truck pulled up next to my parked pickup. 2 county officials stepped out wearing bright orange safety vests and carrying tablets. The older one introduced himself as Mark Delaney from the county planning department. My lawyer had clearly explained the situation quickly. Mark asked a few simple questions while reviewing the documents on his tablet. He looked at the barrier, then he looked at the guards. The expression on his face was the kind people get when they realize they are about to walk into a very uncomfortable conversation. He walked over to the security team and asked who had ordered the closure. One of the guards handed him a printed sheet with the HOA logo at the top. Mark read it for about 5 seconds before lowering the page. Then he calmly explained that the road they were blocking was a county-approved private access route built under permit number MC 44217. The document had been recorded nearly 4 years before the HOA development even existed. The guard looked confused. Mark continued speaking in a steady, professional tone. He explained that interfering with a registered access road could be considered unlawful obstruction of property access. He also mentioned that the county had never issued any order allowing the HOA to close the road, which meant the closure had no legal authority. The guard asked what they should do. Mark didn't hesitate. Remove the barrier immediately. The words hung in the air for a moment. One of the other guards pulled out a radio and spoke quietly to someone on the other end. A few seconds later, the men began moving the metal gate aside. The SUVs reversed off the gravel entrance. Within 3 minutes, the road was completely clear. Mark turned toward me and apologized for the inconvenience, even though none of it was the county's fault. He said the HOA would likely receive a formal notice explaining that they had no jurisdiction over the road. I thanked him, but the situation was far from finished because something about the way the guards had reacted suggested that the HOA believed they are right, and people who believe they are right rarely stop after one warning. That afternoon, my lawyer called again. He had already begun preparing a formal legal response to the HOA. The letter would demand written confirmation that the association would never again interfere with access to my property. It would also document the incident for potential damages if it happened again. I agreed. By the next morning, the letter had been delivered to the HOA management office. What happened next was almost unbelievable. Instead of backing down, the HOA doubled down. 3 days later, another notice appeared in my mailbox. This time it was longer. Much longer. According to the CDR board, their legal advisor believed the road created a community impact corridor connecting the valley to higher elevation land. Because of that claim, they argued the regulate traffic entering the neighborhood streets that led to the base of my road. They also stated that the security team had been placed there to ensure community safety. The letter ended with a sentence that made my lawyer laugh out loud. When he read it, the I attended their next board meeting to discuss a cooperative road management agreement. In other words, they still thought they could force control over something they didn't own. At that point, my lawyer decided it was time to escalate. He filed a formal complaint with the county citing unlawful interference with a permitted access road. He also included the photographs I had taken that morning. 2 days later, the HOA received an official notice from the county planning department. The notice explained very clearly that the association had no authority over my road, and any future attempts to restrict access could result in penalties. Most organizations would have stopped there. But this HOA board had developed a reputation in the valley for believing they were above normal rules. Instead of apologizing, they scheduled their board meeting anyway. And they sent me an invitation. The meeting took place in the neighborhood clubhouse at the center of the development. A large, modern building surrounded by decorative landscaping and carefully maintained walking paths. When I arrived that evening, the parking lot was already full. Word about the road incident had spread quickly through the valley. Several homeowners had come to watch what would happen. Inside the meeting room, the HOA board sat behind a long table at the front. Karen Whitmore sat in the middle. She wore the same confident expression she had shown on my porch months earlier. For a moment she looked slightly surprised to see me actually show up. Then the meeting began. Karen started by talking about community standards and neighborhood safety. She spoke as if the HOA in the valley from chaos. Then she mentioned the road situation. Her explanation made it sound like the HOA had simply taken precautionary steps while reviewing property records. She avoided mentioning the county order entirely. When it was my turn to speak, I simply walked to the front of the room and placed 3 documents on the table: my road construction permit, the county approval certificate, and the official notice the county had sent them earlier that week. The room went silent. Several homeowners leaned forward to read the documents. Karen picked up the county notice and read it slowly. The confident expression disappeared from her face. One of the other board members whispered something to her. She cleared her throat and said the association would need time to review the information. That was the moment something interesting happened. One of the homeowners in the audience raised his hand and spoke. He asked why the HOA had hired armed guards to block a road they did not own. Another homeowner asked how much the security team had cost the association. A third person asked whether HOA dues had paid for the operation. Suddenly the conversation shifted. Instead of discussing my road, the residents began questioning their own board. Karen tried to regain control of the meeting, but the tension in the room was growing. People were beginning to realize the HOA had spent money on a legal fight they could not win. The board quickly ended the meeting after that, but the damage had already started, because once residents begin asking questions about how their HOA is spending money, things tend to spiral quickly. Over the next week, rumors spread throughout the neighborhood. Some residents learned that the HOA had paid thousands of dollars for the security team. Others discovered the board had already consulted lawyers about forcing access rights over my road. The story reached local community groups, then it reached the county office again, and when county officials realized the HOA still believed it had authority over the road, they decided to step in more aggressively. A second notice was sent to the HOA board. This one was not friendly. It warned that continued interference with the registered road could result in legal enforcement action against the association itself. By that point, the board members were starting to panic. But the real problem for them had nothing to do with the county, because homeowners were now demanding answers about why the HOA had spent community funds trying to control property that clearly did not belong to them. And the more those residents investigated, the worse the situation began to look for the border. The road incident had exposed something deeper. The AA had been operating under the assumption that nobody would challenge their authority. Until now, standing in my driveway a few days later, watching the sunset over the valley, I realized the situation had moved far beyond a simple road dispute. The AHA had tried to block my property. Now their own residents were starting to block them. And the next part of the story was about to become even more complicated. Because someone inside the HOA board had made a decision that would turn this entire situation into a full legal confrontation, a decision that would eventually force the association into a position they could not escape. The road might have been open again, but the fight was only beginning. The week after that meeting, the valley felt different. People in the neighborhood below had started talking. Conversations happened in driveways, on sidewalks, and inside the small coffee shop near the entrance of the development. The story about the blocked mountain road had spread far beyond the HOA boardroom. Most residents had originally moved into the neighborhood because they wanted quiet suburban living in a scenic mountain valley. They had trusted the HOA board to handle normal things like landscaping rules and community maintenance. What they had not expected was for their HOA to hire armed guards and start fighting with a property owner who did not even belong to the association. The board members were beginning to realize the situation had slipped out of their control. 3 days later, another letter arrived in my mailbox. This one was different. Instead of the usual warnings and legal language, the HOA was now requesting a friendly resolution meeting. They said they wanted to clarify misunderstandings and move forward peacefully. My lawyer read the letter and laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Organizations that push too far often try to retreat quietly once they realize the consequences are real. But the situation had already crossed a line. The letter from my lawyer that went back to them was very short and very direct. Any further interference with the road would result in a civil claim for damages, and the previous incident involving security guards was already being documented as unlawful obstruction. The AHA board responded by calling an emergency community meeting. Nearly every homeowner in the neighborhood attended. I did not go this time, but several residents later described what happened inside that clubhouse. Karen Whitmore stood at the front of the room again, but the confidence she had shown before was gone. Instead of speaking like someone in charge, she sounded like someone trying to repair damage that had already been done. She explained that the board had acted in what they believed was the community's best interest. She claimed there had been confusion about the road's legal status, but the homeowners had already seen the county notice. They knew the road had been legally registered long before their neighborhood existed. One resident stood up and asked how much money had been spent hiring the security company. Another asked why the board had ignored the county's first warning. Or then someone asked the question that changed the entire atmosphere of the meeting. How much had the HOA already spent on lawyers trying to claim control of the road? The room went silent because nobody on the board had mentioned the legal fees. When the numbers were finally revealed, the reaction from the residents was immediate. Thousands of dollars from HOA funds had already been spent on a fight the association had no chance of winning. People were angry, not just because of the money, but because the board had never asked the residents for approval before starting the dispute. They argued that controlling access roads could protect property values in the future. But by that point, the homeowners were no longer listening. For many of them, the situation had become something else entirely. Within days, residents began organizing a petition to review the HOA board's actions. The neighborhood bylaws allowed homeowners to call a special vote if enough signatures were collected, and signatures started appearing quickly. Meanwhile, the county planning department was still watching the situation closely. My lawyer had kept them informed about every letter and every show the HOA had sent. Eventually, the county scheduled a formal review meeting involving their legal department. The purpose was simple: to determine whether the HOA's actions had violated county regulations regarding private property access. 2 weeks later, a county official called my lawyer with an update. The review had concluded that the HOA had no legal claim over the road. More importantly, the county believed the placement of security guards at the entrance had interfered with lawful property. When the HOA board received that news, the panic became very real. Because a county enforcement case would not only involve penalties but also public documentation of the violation, and public records have a way of spreading quickly, especially in a small community. The board attempted one final strategy. They offered to settle the situation quietly. A letter arrived proposing that the HOA would formally acknowledge my road as private property in exchange for dropping any potential claims against them. The proposal also included an apology. My lawyer considered it carefully, but the problem was that the damage had already spread beyond a private agreement. The county was involved, and the HOA board was facing internal pressure from the very people they were supposed to represent. The special homeowner vote happened about a month after the original road incident. More than 80% of the neighborhood participated. The results were overwhelming. 3 of the 5 board members were removed from their positions that night. The homeowners immediately appointed temporary replacements and new elections could be held, not just to me, but to the entire neighborhood. The letter explained that the previous board had acted outside the limits of their authority and had created unnecessary legal conflict. It also confirmed something important. The HOA officially recognized my mountain road as private property with no association jurisdiction. A week later, I received a phone call from one of the new board members. He sounded exhausted. He explained that the association had already spent a large amount of money dealing with the consequences of the previous board's decisions. Legal consultations, security contracts, cost. The new board wanted to ensure nothing like that ever happened again. For the first time since the dispute started, the conversation felt reasonable. The valley slowly returned to normal after that. The security guards never returned. The threatening letters stopped completely, and the HOA began focusing on things that actually belonged within their community. Landscaping, maintenance, neighborhood events. As for my mountain road, it remained exactly what it had always been. A quiet gravel path winding through pine trees toward the house I had built years earlier. Sometimes when I drive down the mountain early in the morning, I still remember the sight of those black SUVs blocking the entrance. The guards standing there believing they were enforcing authority that never existed. It almost feels unreal now. But the story became something of a legend in the valley. New homeowners sometimes hear about the road incident when they first move into the neighborhood. Most people laugh when they learn how the situation started. An HOA board convinced they controlled everything around them, and a mountain road they never bothered to check the records for. In the end, the lesson was simple. Property rights are not decided by neighborhood meetings or confidence speeches inside a clubhouse. They are decided by documents, permits, and the law. And when someone builds something with their own time, money, and legal approval, trying to take control of it usually ends badly, especially when the people making that decision never realize who they are actually dealing with. The road still curves up the mountain exactly the same way it always has. The gravel crunches under tires. The pine trees sway in the wind, and every time I pass the entrance where those SUVs once stood, I remember the moment the HOA tried to block a road I built myself. They thought they were taking control of the valley. Instead, they lost control of their own board, and all it took was one very bad decision at the bottom of a mountain road.